So grinders. So like I said earlier tonight, grinders are something that you need to be really familiar with because you're going to use them a lot. You use them for preparing metal in terms of removing rust and scale, like you just stated. You're going to use it for removing oxidation, mill scale, stuff like that, so that you can weld properly. You're going to use it for beveling or grooving out edges of pieces so that you can put things together the right way. They're used for a lot of different things. If you have to have a flush surface, you're going to use it for grinding the weld bead down so that you have a nice looking surface. And of course, you know, all kinds of other prep things. You can use it to cut too. So hopefully I'm going to be able to show you a bunch of different things here. So the first thing I guess we'll show you is the grinders. These are the 3 grinders that we have currently for the shop here. And 2 of these have regular grinding discs on them, and 1 has a cutting disc. And a grinding disc is going to look like this. It's going to be a hard kind of a disc. Here we can pass this around, you can take a look at it. The second kind of disc that we're going to talk about is a flap disc. That's what this is. And the flap disc has layers of sandpaper stacked in a radial pattern on the disc. And what's nice about these is that as it wears, more of the abrasive is exposed. And so they have a tendency to last a long time. But they're more expensive than a sanding disc, and I'll show sanding discs in a little bit. The third kind of disc we're going to talk about is a cutting disc. And these are very narrow, okay, and they're meant for cutting. And the fact that they're very narrow makes them efficient because they can cut through material without having to remove a lot of material. All you're trying to do is part 2 pieces of material. You're not trying to remove a lot of material if you can help it. Even for woodworkers now, they have saw blades that are considered to be thin kerf blades, which remove a smaller amount of material, which creates less waste, but it also uses less horsepower in order to cut through because you're not trying to cut a load of material out of the way. So, you know, this is the same principle as that. So those are the 3 basic categories. Now there's a few different configurations of these things. For the basic grinding disc, you've got discs that have no hub on them. This has a metal piece, you know, inserted in here, but there's really no hub on here. This one has a threaded hub. Okay, so either one of these, they both work the same way. It's just that this one doesn't require any adapters or any kind of other items that you need in order to attach this to a standard 5/8 threaded shaft that's on all of these grinders. And that is standardized. This one here requires you to use a couple of different kinds of adapters. You need to have something that fits in here so that this fits on here properly, and you hold it the right way, and all these pieces have to fit together properly. The outside disc, or I should start with the inside one. The inside disc usually has a recess with a couple of flats on it, and that fits on the flats that are on the shaft of the grinder, and that's what helps to drive it. So you have to make sure that this side is down. So once you have that down, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a ridge that sticks up here, and I'll pass this around so you can look at this. And that ridge engages the hole in the grinding disc. So this has to be on here. If you don't have this on correctly and you try to put it on offset or it's tilted for some reason, the disc is going to wobble, and that's very dangerous. That's a dangerous condition to have on a grinder. So once you know that you've got this on here the right way, then again there's a protrusion on this side and you have another side that has a recess. And this can be used either way. When you're using this kind of a disc, you want to put that protrusion down, and that fits also in the hole, and that's what has the threads on it, and you tighten everything down. When you're using a thin disc, like the cutoff disc, when you're using the cutoff disc, the same thing happens on the first adapter. Okay, fits in there, and these are the easiest ones to get crooked. So you really want to make sure that this is centered up when you put it on the machine. This one here, you need the recess side, and that's this side here, and that goes down on here and threads on. And that's what holds this on, because the outer edges of this are putting pressure on the disc so as to drive it. So you have to make sure that you use these pieces the right way. You never put something on a grinder without using the proper adapters. And these things get lost all the time. This one here is designed to be used with a sanding disc. And I have a big sanding disc here I can show you in a second. But that's what this is for. Okay, and this is threaded, and this is going to be the outside piece that goes into the center to hold a sanding disc on. But it's a different kind of a setup. If you have a grinder and you lose these pieces, you can't improvise stuff and just throw like a stack of washers on and some odd nut you found in a junk bin. Okay, that doesn't work. Because if there's nothing to hold this into the center, as soon as you start cutting or grinding, if that thing goes offset and it runs off center, you can destroy it in a second. And when these things come apart, they come apart violently, and you can really get hurt if you do not have this mounted properly. So don't shortcut, okay? If you lose these pieces, you got to stop working and you got to find another set. You got to buy another set or find out where you lost them from. Okay? Some of the other things that are available to use on a grinder, and I'm showing you right now all 4.5-inch grinder accessories. There are things like this. This is a screw-on hub, but it's got Velcro. It's got hook and loop type attachment. And this one here has a buffing pad, and I can just peel that off, and I can buy a number of different kinds of buffing pads and finishing pads, kind of like Scotch-Brite type pads and stuff like that. And they're fantastic. I mean, these things are a little pricey to get started with, buying the basic kit with the hub, and you get an assortment of stuff, but they work really well if you do a lot of metal finishing, okay? This one works kind of the same way, it's just a different brand. This one here is interesting. This is all plastic, entirely plastic, even the threads. And this is meant for removing like scaly paint, rusty scaly paint. And it works amazingly well. It's just fantastic. I don't know who makes this, and I want to find out, because I'd like to buy a couple more of these because they work really, really well. And they're all plastic, but it's pretty rigid plastic, and they're pretty strong. This is starting to lose some teeth around the edges here, but they work well. This is a rubber pad that backs up a sanding disc. So I don't have any 4.5-inch sanding discs here, but I've got a couple of larger ones, so we'll talk about that in a second. But the rubber is what you need for a sanding disc, because the backup for a sanding disc needs to be flexible. And again, it uses some kind of an adapter like this that goes into the center, and it holds that sanding disc in place. Some of the other things that you're going to want to use are wire wheels. This is the kind of worn out wire wheel that we happen to have here. For our course, I got to buy some new ones. These are ones that I brought in from home. These are pretty new. I bought them recently. This is made for a 4.5-inch angle grinder, as is this. It's just it's a larger cup wheel. These are cup wheels. This is a straight wheel, and these things work really, really well. The biggest mistake that people make with these is pushing too hard. Okay, you're supposed to just put moderate pressure on the wires and use them so that the ends of the wires do the work. And they work very, very well that way. You significantly shorten the life of the wheels, of the wires, when you push too hard, because when you're pushing really hard, you're bending the wires. And they're constantly bending and straightening and bending and straightening as it's spinning around. And as a consequence, you snap them off. And speaking of which, anytime you use any of this stuff, but particularly I'm bringing this up now talking about wire wheels, you must have gloves on, body protection, safety glasses, and you should be wearing a face shield. Or if you have a helmet that has a grind mode, that is usually like a shade 3. It's light, but it's still shaded. If that bugs you, I mean, you can use that, but if it bugs you, then you get a clear face shield. You want to protect your body from these wires breaking off and flying, because as this wears, first of all, they all lose wires. They all do. But as they wear, the tips of these wires become pointy. And when they finally break off, they're like little arrows. Some of the other things that you can use on a grinder, before I get to the bigger ones. Oh, I just thought of something I didn't bring in too. These are diamond cup wheels. This is a diamond cup wheel that you can use on a 4.5-inch grinder. And this is for grinding concrete, stone, brick, stuff like that. These work really well. And then you can also cut. So this is a set of 2 diamond-coated ceramic wheels for cutting things like, tile, marble, concrete, whatever. And these will fit on a 4.5-inch. You can see it's marked on here, 4.5-inch. So it's important when you buy stuff for any of the grinders that you check to make sure that you know what the speed of the grinder is and that you have an attachment that is designed to run at or greater than the machine's speed. You never want to take a large disc, something like this, and adapt it to fit on a machine like this, because this machine runs way faster than what this is designed to spin at. Keep the guards on the grinders and make sure that whatever you're putting on the grinder is rated for the RPM of the machine. Okay, don't over rev the stuff. Very dangerous. These are pretty manageable to control, but they're small and they're lightweight, and you don't want to be pushing really hard. If you have a lot of material to remove, you need to go to a bigger machine, especially something that has more weight and it has more power. And that would be something like these machines. I brought these 2 in. We don't have any big ones here at the college. These are 2 of mine. I think I have 4 like this. And these are real heavy-duty industrial machines. These can just do a tremendous amount of work. Years ago, my father worked at a company that built coal handling equipment. So they were welding, big heavy-duty stuff. And they all had these. They had these Milwaukees, these older Milwaukees before they were made in China. And, this is a hefty machine. This one here I got, and I put a new cord on it. Let's unwrap this. So you can buy replacement parts for a lot of these machines too. But I didn't get to run this before I put the cord on because, well, it had a bad cord. So I put the cord on it, and now I find that this machine's gearbox is kind of worn out. And you can hear that when I plug it in. By the way, now that I'm thinking about it, anytime that you are going to change a wheel or run something, always make sure that it's unplugged. Okay? Make sure that the machine is unplugged. I'm not going to grind anything with this. I'm just going to turn it on. But you'll hear what I'm talking about with the noisy gearbox. Right there. Right? It's really kind of rattly. By the way, you notice how I put that down? Okay, the grinder always sits on its back. That's why this has a rubber pad on the back. This is new too. This one was broken and I bought a new one for it. Not all of them have them, but that has it. So that's the right way. If you put the grinder down this way, you're leaning on the disc and you could break the disc. And if the disc is fractured, then you turn it on and blam, and the thing flies apart. They are pretty tough. I mean, they're fiber reinforced. You can even see the fibers in the composition of the disc, holding all the abrasive together, but still, you don't want to fracture the thing because, like I said, I've seen them come apart. Always have the guard on the machine and always use it the right way. Getting bit by one of these is really painful. I have a scar on my finger here that runs right up my finger from having one of these cutoff discs. There's the cutoff disc, this thing here. Have that run up my finger, okay? I'd rather get cut by a knife than have this thing grind over my finger. It's just really painful. So these are pretty big machines. They can do a lot of cutting and grinding. They work really well. So let's look at, before I get to some specific things, let's just look at some of the other things that we use on a big machine. Big sanding discs. Obviously, productivity is pretty high when you start getting into something this size. Sanding discs come in all different grits. Cutoff wheel. You can pass that around. You can pass these around too. Notice that even though that cutoff wheel is large, it's very thin. And it is strong, but you have to be careful how you use them. All right, enough about that. So, small grinders, more than adequate for what we're doing in here. Big grinders, cut big stuff, do big things. Let me see, what else? What didn't I show you? I think there was something else I wanted to show you. This is the sanding disc set for the big Milwaukee grinder. This piece goes on, then this fiberboard piece goes on, then the sanding disc goes on. Notice that this has slots cut in it, which makes it easier than nose discs to attach to this because this has got a tapered depression. This goes on, and then I don't know where it is, but there's the centerpiece, so don't lose the parts. Do as I say, not as I do, my mother used to say to me. Okay, but that's how that works. So you've got corded grinders and you've got cordless grinders. And this is my Makita, which I really like a lot. I have a bunch of Makita cordless tools now. I ended up buying just a drill because the drill I had from years ago was like kind of old tech. And I just bought one tool to try it out. And I didn't have any brand loyalty, and I bought the Makita, and I liked it so much, now I have like 9 different Makita tools. You know, the battery technology is really great on these cordless tools these days, you know, because, you know, the lithium batteries have gotten so good, you know, they recharge fast, they have a lot of power. But on something like this, they don't last that long. They still just don't last all that long. So my preference for a grinder is, if I have to do a lot of grinding, is a corded grinder. And there's many different configurations of them. You can see that this has a button here with a safety button. You've got to pull this down and then push it. If you just grab it, it won't work. You have to go like that and push this down. These here, this is an older design, and all you have to do is just pull this down, and that's it. So if you lay this down on its front, you could push the button down, and then the starts turning and the thing damages some stuff or you get hurt. These here are a little easier to deal with. This has a button too that you can pull in, and it's also got a lock button on the side. But it's got a hand grip, which makes it a lot easier for students that are not used to using this to hang on to. There are short ones that have a body about this long. You've probably seen them if you've done any work with these things. And you got to grab it like this. I don't have a big hand, so this is a lot more comfortable for me to hold on to anyway. You've got the grip, the side handle. The side handle has ambidextrous holes, so if you're left-handed or right-handed, or you've got to do some work on the other side that you can't get into otherwise, you can take the handle off. These just screw off. Some of them have a hole in the top. Does this one have? No, that doesn't have one. Some of them have a hole in the top so that if you're cutting and you've got the wheel in this orientation, if you're using it this way and you're cutting down, you can put the handle in the top, and that's more comfortable to hold when you're cutting. So depending on what you're going to use them for, there's a lot of different options. Everybody makes different versions of this: Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, corded, cordless. Like I said, I keep a cutoff disc on this, and this just sits there, and the cutoff disc is on it all the time. If I need a little piece of material at home, wing, I can just grab it really quick and I can cut something off, or I can cut the end of a bolt off or something like that, and I can do that quickly. You know, I don't have to pull out this and hook everything up and go through a lot of work connecting everything. okay? Otherwise, the corded version, that's my recommendation. You know, I think it's a lot better to start off with a corded unit, one of these. I have this Makita, I have a corded Makita in 4.5, and I have an old Sears that I bought, I don't know, probably 30 years ago that still works really well. And I have a Milwaukee, a small Milwaukee too. And it's nice having a bunch of different grinders because you can have a cutoff disc on one, a grinding disc on another one, and a flap wheel on the third one. So you can cut a piece of material off, you can deburr or grind down a weld bead or something like that with the grinding disc, and then you can do some finishing with the flap wheels. And another thing I wanted to say about the flap wheel is the flap wheel is not a grinding wheel. So if you need to remove a bead that you've welded something here, you don't want to be using this. If it's brand new, it will take it down, but it's going to wear the disc out so fast you'll get 3 or 4 uses out of it, and then this will be garbage. And they're kind of pricey. Okay, so this is really just for finishing. Okay. I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
The steel, the brushes.
Yes.
What is the primary function of them?
Remove paint, remove rust, scale, stuff like that. They don't take metal off. Some people push so hard on them that you can start to see metal being taken off. If you're cleaning up something that is corroded and it's aluminum, these are really kind of rough for that because you'll start to round over edges on something that's soft. You can even do that with steel if you push too hard with them, you know. They're good for removing paint on a railing or something if you have to refinish some railings, or any one of a number of different things like that. But that's their primary purpose. It's surface preparation. That's really what these are. This one here and this one. You know, these are really considered to be surface prep type of tools, okay? The thing you're going to use most of the time is one of these kind of hard 1/4 inch thick grinding discs, okay? When you're using the grinder, and I'll work with you when you're using it, but when you're using the grinder, you want to be sure that you are grinding at about a 20 to 30 degree angle from horizontal. Okay, you don't want to be down like this because you're putting too much load on the edge and you're going to gouge into your material. So you should be at about a 20 to 30 degree angle. For the finishing discs, you need to be even lower. You need to be in the 5 to 10 degree range for finishing. You want to always have the grinder moving. Start it, get it up to speed, and then apply it to the surface and always keep moving. If you sit in one spot, you're going to make a gouge. So there's a little feel to this. There's a little, practice. A long time ago, I think I threw it away, but I had a piece that I welded together, and then I ground the weld off and I finished it, and it looked like a mirror, and it looked like one piece, and everyone was so amazed. It's not that amazing. It's not that hard to do. Use the right tools, get a little experience with it, and practice with it, and you'll be able to do really good work. Some of you on your projects, it may come to pass that you make bad welds because you're just learning how to weld. And if that's the case, you need to remove that weld. And a hard grinding disc like this is perfect for getting into an edge and cutting that weld out, or going in vertically and cutting that out. So, but there's other methods too to do stuff like that. All right. Anything else?
You use one of those to like bevel an edge?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
You just kind of like work it out until you get...
Yeah, you just want to, like say for example, if this were a steel plate that I was going to bevel, you know, I'd get it up to speed, and then I'd just go back and forth, nice and easy. Again, you can't use too much pressure because you'll end up making the undulations in the surface. But yeah, absolutely, you can do that with something like this. That's what it's made for. Quality of discs. Some discs are cheap, meaning they're inexpensive, but they're junky. They don't last very long. They don't use very good abrasives. Some of the better stuff, I don't like buying junky stuff. I got these. This is Diablo. These work really well. I forget who makes this. Do you know who makes Diablo stuff? Do you remember?
No, Home Depot sells Diablo.
That's true, yeah. So, you know, Home Depot's got this kind of stuff. I think the Diablo stuff's really good. I got a bunch of free stuff a while back, Sawzall blades and other stuff, and I got to try out a bunch of Diablo stuff, and it seems to work pretty well. Walter is another company. This isn't found that easily because it's more of like an industrial kind of a product. So you're not going to find Walter stuff. I don't think you're going to find it in any kind of like regular retail kind of places, like in a Home Depot or Lowe's or at the hardware store, stuff like that. I don't think you're going to find it. Welding supply store would have something like this. And these work really well. They last a long time and they perform very, very well. The 3M stuff, 3M's Cubitron 2 grinding wheels, amazing. Okay, this is amazing. You know, but they're not cheap. You know, they're kind of pricey. But you know, if you can afford them, and I forget what they are now, but some of these can be as much as $5 or $6 a piece. But the good ones cut, they perform, and they last a long time. So it's a good value. Even though it's more money up front, it's a good value. Something else I wanted to mention here, which I almost forgot about, was that you want to make sure that the disc that you choose is designed for the material that you're working with. For example, the Cubitron 2, okay, it says here grinding wheel, and it says what kind of material this is for. So it should say steel, or it may say stainless steel on here. You don't want to use a wheel for steel on stainless steel, because stainless steel can become contaminated. By the same token, you don't want to use a regular wheel on aluminum. Notice this says ALU on it, right? ALU. Okay, and Walter codes all of their aluminum stuff green, so you can see it. And I have steel, stainless steel, and aluminum cutting discs made by Walter. And again, it's a premium product. They perform really well. But the purpose of having designated aluminum wheels is that, number one, they don't clog up. Aluminum is a much softer material than steel is. So the bond, okay, and the hardness of the wheel is going to be different than a wheel designed for grinding steel, okay? These don't clog up. If you use a regular wheel that's designed for steel on a piece of aluminum, it's going to clog up, or load up, it's called. And then you can't get the chunks of aluminum out of it, and it's not going to work. These don't load up. That's what they're made for, okay? The other issue is, if you guys take welding 2, you get to weld on some aluminum, and aluminum has to be very, very clean before you weld it. You can't contaminate it with stuff. So even a wire brush, as you're brushing it, should be a stainless steel bristled brush that has never touched anything else other than aluminum. So you don't want to contaminate it with steel particles. If you brush a piece of aluminum with a steel brush, a steel bristled brush, even if it's brand new, you're going to transfer some of that steel or some of that carbon from the steel bristles into the aluminum, and it's going to increase the difficulty of welding it. Aluminum is hard to weld because it needs to be clean. That's why they make specific wheels, so they don't have any constituents in the wheel that can contaminate the aluminum. Okay? I'm glad I remembered to talk about that. So, sure. Okay. So, now I don't know why, but I couldn't find the wrench to do this. But I would argue that oftentimes you don't need the wrench. So somewhere on the back of the grinder, they all have one somewhere. You can see the black button here, okay? This one has it on the side. It's an older design. These have a black button. You need to push the button in, and that locks the wheel. It locks it so it won't turn now. And make sure that this is unplugged, okay? And oftentimes with a gloved hand, you can just go like that and you can loosen it. Take that piece off, take that off, and we can take that part off. So now we need something on here. Now if I'm going to use, say, something like this, my, what do you call it, pad? My Scotch-Brite pad Velcro thing, that can just spin on and then I tighten it up, okay? Can use that. We can put the Cubitron 2, we can put that directly on here, and notice this has a hex. This has a hex on it, so you can get a thin wrench in here to take this off. This also does not need any kind of a hub to hold it on. So we can just put it on like that. It fits to the proper depth, and that works fine. Flap wheel. The flap wheel is going to need this hub put on it. So we put this adapter on. It's got the flats on this side. It fits to the flats on here. We put this on. Make sure that this is down all the way. It clicks down. Flap wheel goes on. Make sure it's centered up. We want the recessed side. Put that on. Hold this down. Just turn it with your hand. That's it. That's all you need. You don't need the wrench to crank down on this and make it really tight. Because when this spins, it's going to tighten itself. Okay, you can't reverse the direction of this. So this is always going to turn in this direction. And that's always going to be putting force backwards and tightening it up. And then to take it off, you can just spin it off. That's it. Takes 2 seconds. Cutoff disc, same thing. Oh, that's too big. This is a 5-inch. Okay. That won't fit on here, but the thin disc will fit the same way. But you got to see, this is a 5-inch. This is a 4.5-inch grinder. This one here doesn't have a hub. So this goes on, but this one goes on this way with the protrusion going down because the disc is thick enough for it. I can just put that on and just give it a little tighten up. That'll be fine. That's all you need. Comes right off. Don't lose the parts. I think that's pretty much it for this. All right, any questions? That was a long explanation for something that's relatively simple, but it's necessary to talk about, especially the safety aspect of everything.